Choices program, an international nonprofit humane educational program focused on education, inspiring and empowering high school and college students to make food choices that benefit themselves, animals, and the environment. ECP has humane educators throughout the U.S., Canada, and Australia. Lorena has a degree in zoology from Texas A&M and a graduate degree in ecology and sustainable development from Argentina.
Yes.
Please give a warm welcome to Lorena.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. I think I'm going to talk on this side because I don't want to cross in front of the projector. But I am very honored to be here, about to share a little bit about our program, and honored to be sharing the stage with so many great speakers. But more than anything, every time I talk to an audience, I make sure that I acknowledge each and every one of you. Because if you're here, that means that you've already been thinking about the consequences of your food choices. Either you're thinking about embarking in this amazing journey of veganism, or you are already in the journey, right? And those of us that are already in the journey recognize that it's a journey of compassion and action, a journey of aligning our values with our choices, and also a journey that really challenges us to go against society in a way, because society wants us to see animals as commodities when we know that there's so much more than that. So this journey is a little bit painful many times. We are exposed to a lot of cruelty, to a lot of devastation, and it's okay. It's okay to learn those things, because information leads to discussion, and discussion leads to progress. So thank you for being here, for thinking about these food choices, and for supporting one another, inspiring one another. So anyway, thank you. Yay! Thank you. Some of you might have noticed my accent, my awesome accent. I'm from Bolivia, and I grew up in South America, in Bolivia and Argentina, eating the standard American diet, minus junk food. A lot of people don't know that, for example, McDonald's went broke in Bolivia. They went bankrupt and they left. So obviously there are people that don't agree with what we eat. And sometimes we have to wonder, what is it that makes them make that connection, right? And I was very fortunate to be brought up by very unique parents, in the sense that they encouraged me to question everything. And they supported me, that questioning and challenging of things. And I was a very compassionate child. I was allowed to bring stray dogs and cats to our home, injured birds and wildlife like turtles and other animals, bunnies that were experimented on by high school science students in my high school. And they put up with a lot, right? But they could not help me make the connection that I wanted so badly with farm animals, because they were feeding those animals to me, right? And I always fought with that conflict, that inner conflict. And now that I have 3 kids, and those 3 kids are being raised vegans, and I see how easily they embrace this lifestyle. So I wonder, what would have helped me as a child to make the connection that my children have easily made? And it turns out that looking back, I recognize that it's the lack of support, the lack of information, and the community. Because this Veg Fest, for example, exists to give us that fellowship, the support. Because it's a lonely world out there, right, as a vegan. Especially when you're traveling, then you recognize, whoa, there's not that many of us yet. But the world is changing. But I think just the fact that we recognize that there's so many more of us, and that we support one another, and that there's tons of information available to us, is what makes us what makes so many of us make the connection, and therefore make changes. And today I'm representing, I think, one of the best programs that exist in the area of human education. I'm going to refer to it as ECP, which is short for Ethical Choices Program. And what we do is we focus on human education, because human education, we believe, is one of the most powerful tools in the movement that will create enormous change and very rapidly. And a lot of you might not know exactly what human education is, so that's what I'm going to explain first. So human education is a tool that instills in everyone, or those that are exposed to human education, the desire to live with compassion, with integrity, or with justice. And obviously, those values are a common ground. I don't know anyone that doesn't agree with this, right? Everyone, whether they eat animals or not, they agree that we should be as compassionate as we can, that we should live lives of integrity and justice. So finding that common ground is the first thing in order to let people bring their walls down. Secondly, human education provides the knowledge and the tools to put these inner values into practice. So we can all work together and find solutions to these urgent problems that society is facing, that our world is facing. So human education works not just providing information, but also providing the tools and the environment for change. And our program, ECP, focuses on food and how food affects animals, affects environment, and affects our health. And I always say food matters. It matters more than probably any other choice that we make, because it's a choice that we are faced to make every single day, many times a day, right? And food matters because the consequences are very tangible. In fact, as far as health goes, we know that we're going through one of the worst health crises in our country. Heart disease is the #1 killer. Cancer is the #2 killer. 30% of adults are obese. 1 in 3 kids is expected to develop diabetes in their lifetime, et cetera, et cetera. So there are a lot of people that are suffering tremendously due to these health problems, and also the people, their loved ones, their friends and family. And just recognizing that food actually can prevent many of these diseases and actually reverse them is fantastic. But also we recognize that 20% of our GDP here in the US is devoted to treat these entirely preventable diseases. That's insane. That's insane for our economy. That's insane, for our own health. The solution is at the reach of our hand, but a lot of people don't know about it. Secondly, the environment. I think the animal agriculture industry is the most egregious waste industry as far as waste. We waste resources, we pollute water, soil, air. In fact, the United Nations agrees that animal agriculture is the top polluter of water worldwide. It's the biggest promoter of deforestation. It creates ocean dead zones. We know that by 2050, well, actually they say 2048, all the oceans will be decimated. There won't be enough fish in the oceans. So what kind of world are we leaving our children, right? We know that animal agriculture is one of the biggest promoters of greenhouse gases. And we know that climate change is a reality that we need to tackle. Right? And luckily, this generation recognizes that. Also, we need to think about the workers. We are, because of the demand of animal products, we are making jobs available that are very abusive, that are available to people who are desperate. We know that the majority of people who work in factory farms and slaughterhouses are actually illegal immigrants, ex-convicts, mentally disabled people, just people who are desperate for a job, and they will do anything to put food on the table. And we must recognize that we are paying them to do the dirty job that we don't want to do. They're exposed to diseases. They're exposed to violence. And there's so many studies that show that actually factory farm workers, and especially slaughterhouse workers, are suffered of very high rates of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, because they are exposed to a lot of violence and they are pushed to also be violent to these animals. And lastly, we can't forget about the animals. In fact, to me, it's the most important issue that we are talking about in relation to food. It's our greatest moral failure. We treat animals as if they were commodities, And in that process, we've broken that sacred, I think, human-animal bond. And in the process, we have lost part of our humanity. And it takes a little step from being cruel to an animal to being cruel to a human. The FBI says so, not just us, right? That's why when there's someone who abuses people, the first thing they check is, has that person abused an animal before? Because that's a red flag. So just by making people do these jobs, by us looking at animals not as the magnificent, mysterious beings that they are, but actually as commodities, I think it probably harms us more than sometimes we're harming them. So these are the main reasons why we decided to focus on food choices. And a lot of people would say, well, how is humane education different? We have people who offer videos in these pay-per-view tracks. We have people who leaflet dozens and dozens of colleges every year, which is fantastic. We have people that work on social media and protests and et cetera. And I think all those tools are fantastic. In fact, I think that the more perspectives that we attack this issue, the better. But humane education is very unique in many ways, and I'm going to go through those so you recognize the potential that we see in humane education. The first one is that we recognize that in order to educate people, we have to do it well. And in order to do it well, we have to invest in them, not only monetary resources, but also time, energy, research, etc. And we don't spare at all on these resources, but we do it very effectively. The second thing is that humane education acknowledges that human beings are part of a society, are part of a culture. And therefore, we carry this belief system that we've pretty much inherited, right? Nobody asks us if we wanted to eat animals or not. We sort of embraced it because it was taught to us since we were little kids. So by recognizing that people have these very dear beliefs, right, that their parents taught them, that society teaches them, it's hard sometimes to let them go. So as a humane educator, I recognize that these people must go through a painful process sometimes of letting go, but that's part of growth. So we recognize that those beliefs and those emotions are just part of being a human being and being part of a society. Thirdly, humane education encourages critical thinking. And I think this is the most important part of humane education. Without critical thinking, there's no discussion. And I said it before, if there's no discussion, there's no progress. And if there's no progress, we can't make informed decisions or help the animals or be healthier or try to restore the environment. And I'm going to go a little bit later on how we encourage critical thinking. But by far, this is our most important goal as a humane education program. The fourth item is that humane education does not see race, political view, gender, or any division or boundary among human beings. We recognize they are there, but we present information in a very non-discriminatory way, in a non-judgmental way, and a non-confrontational way. We recognize that people don't like to be told in the face what to do. I don't. Nobody does, right? We recognize that people need to be eased into the subject. We recognize that putting guilt on someone, it doesn't last, right? Guilt is never a good motivator, right? Instead, what we try to encourage is accountability. Because if we replace accountability for guilt, accountability for guilt, then we are creating long-lasting changes. Because accountability means to be responsible for my choices and the consequences of those choices. And that's why I think sometimes people might go vegan for a little bit because they feel so bad about watching a video, but then they don't feel accountable, and then they go back to eating animals. Last but not least, actually this is one more after this, but it provides tools for change. Because we recognize that if we inform people, right, and we inspire them, and we encourage them to make choices, they're not going to make any choices if they don't have the tools at the reach of their hands. And we recognize, too, that not all tools are the same. So when we present at high schools, and I'm going to show you some of those things, we recognize that kids need videos, they need leaflets, they need information, they need a mentor, they need a support group, and we try to offer a lot of those tools to create change. And last, human education provides environment for growth. Because one thing is to give information to someone and give them all the tools and then walk away. And one thing that we need to recognize is that people live under different circumstances. And those circumstances might help them to make changes or might not help them to make changes. When we go to schools, some of those schools are in wealthy areas. So people have access to all these gourmet vegan meats and vegan cheeses and stuff. Other times we go to schools that are in very poor areas. They live in food deserts, so they cannot make changes that we want them to make. So in that instance, we encourage them to make choices to the best of their abilities within their circumstances. And I think that's liberating, and that's just, because we cannot ask people to do more than they can. So our approach is that do something. It's not about going vegan or nothing. Maybe go vegan once a week. Maybe replace cow's milk for soy milk. Maybe once a week, choose one day and not eat any animal products. Maybe encourage your parents to make changes. Maybe, form a club in your school. So there's a lot of things that we encourage kids to do, again, according to their circumstances, because we are not on the same boat sometimes, right? I wanted to go back to why we encourage critical thinking. I mentioned before that I think it's the most important goal of a human educator. And we encourage critical thinking in many, many ways. The first one is that we always present with open-ended questions. Like I said before, people don't like to be told what to do, right, or what to think. In fact, at the very beginning of every presentation, we tell the kids, I'm not here to tell you what to think or not to think, or what to eat or not to eat, or what industries you should support or not support. We're here to encourage you to think critically and allow you to make your own decisions based on your values and beliefs. And after that, we start presenting information with these open-ended questions, and it turns out that the kids already know the answers, but nobody had ever asked them how they felt about it. So most of the time, they give us the information that we want them to have on their own, and it's pretty cool. So that presentations are very interactive and engaging all the time. Second, we offer activities. We have them pretend to be chickens in battery cages, for example. So they cannot move, they cannot stretch their arms, they can't quit. And they get a little taste of what it might be like to be a factory farmed animal. And that's pretty cool, because once we experience something uncomfortable, it's hard to let go. Also, we make them pretend that they're the US population, and they realize how many out of them will die of heart disease, how many of them will die of cancer, how many of them might develop diabetes if they keep eating the standard American diet. And again, right, activities that are hands-on are very eye-opening. Also, we make them pretend that they are the world population, and they figure out how many of them will go hungry, because we devote most of our grain to feed animals and not to people. And they recognize that if we all ate fewer animals, then more grains would be freed and more people could be fed. So we help them make a lot of connections through hands-on experiences. Third, we show them videos. We show them the good and the bad. We show them the standard practices in factory farms, debeaking, castration, slaughter, confinement, etc. We explain them what they see and why they do what they do. But again, we also show them the good. We show them how there's a better way to relate to animals. We show them a movie of animals in farm sanctuary settings, interacting with their caretakers, being loved and allowing them to enjoy their instincts and needs. So it's beautiful for them to see that it turns out that the animals that they call food are not that different from the animals that they call pets. And lastly, we offer a lot of discussion. The discussion is not left towards the end. In fact, one of the things that we encourage kids is to raise their hands at any point during the presentation and ask questions, make comments, give their opinion. And we say it's okay to disagree. We want to know what those teenagers think. And by them being allowed to have a voice, they're much more open to hear our voice too. Because remember, if we expect kindness from people, we have to be kind. If we expect respect, we have to show them respect, right? And that's something that is very tangible in our interactions with high schoolers. And this is what we want them to see. Why love one, but hate the other, right? But that's not something you can ask someone from the get-go, because immediately they'll be saying, what, you want me to not to eat animals? That's not the way, right? So that's the result of the whole presentation. For them to arrive to the question, why do we do that, right? It actually doesn't make much sense. And we achieve this by actually making connections within society. We talk about the different forms of discrimination. We allow the teens to come up with these things. For example, we talk about racism. And we ask them, do you think racism is still palpable in our society? And what do you think they say? Yes, of course, right? But then we say, no, you're right. But what about 100 years ago? Is it any better? And immediately they think, well, 100 years ago there was slavery and segregation. So it seems that we've gotten better. We're not perfect, but we've gotten better. And we ask them why. Well, it turns out that some people didn't agree with it and decided to challenge the status quo. So it's okay. So when we know better, we do better. And they start thinking, you can see their wheels turning. We talk about sexism. And then we ask them again, right? Do you think there's sexism in this country? Some people say no. Some people say yes. But most people agree that we still, women don't earn as much as men, per dollar, et cetera, et cetera. Sometimes in our society, pregnancy and birth are viewed as an obstacle for the corporate world. And then we give examples in other countries where women have to be covered from head to toe, et cetera. But then we ask them, let's go back to 100 years. Was it any different? And they answer, right? Of course it was. Women could not vote, for example. A woman could not be running for president, for example, right? And all those things, they realize, wow, so that means we can challenge the status quo. It's okay to challenge society because society is not always right. So they feel empowered that challenging behavior that naturally teenagers have, it can actually work in our favor. We talk about speciesism. Most teenagers have never heard the word speciesism. But, it's pretty common sense for them when we start defining racism as the discrimination against other races, sexism, the discrimination against another gender, and speciesism, the discrimination against other species. And when they recognize that, they don't believe they're they're very speciesist. And, we go into, it turns out that we are all speciesist to a certain degree. But the most important thing that we want to recognize is that all these forms of discrimination feed on each other. We know that it's so easy to discriminate someone just because it's a little bit different from us. Imagine how much easier it is to discriminate an animal that is so different from us, right? So they recognize that all those are actually running parallel. And when we attack one, we're attacking the other. So it's a good thing. So when we talk about speciesism, some kids say, I'm not a speciesist. There's no way. I love my dog and my cat. And that's the common belief of most people, right? But when we ask them, a cow, what is a cow in our society? They realize, it's food. I think of a burger when I think of cow. Then we ask them, what do you think about the puppy? And they say, it's a pet. And we're like, that's right. When we ask them, I want my kids to go see an elephant, where do I take them? And they say, to the zoo or to the circus. So we come up with, sometimes they're used as entertainment. Then we ask them about the iconic panda. What do they represent? And everyone knows, it's a protected species, and it represents wildlife. Then we ask them, what about if your house is full of rats? They say, we'll call pest control. So they are labeled as pests. And then suddenly you see the light bulb, turning on when they recognize that we're putting animals in different categories with the assigned labels to them when they have not been born with a certain label. And moreover, they recognize that these labels or these categories are not even universal, right? Because in some countries, they don't eat cows. They think we might be a little crazy because we eat cows. In other countries, dogs are food, but here they're pets. So that's the first time that they recognize, well, it turns out that I'm doing what my culture told me to do, but not what I want to do maybe, right? So allowing them to make those choices is huge, it's very important. And finally, as far as speciesism, we want them to recognize the issue of sentience. We know that animals are sentient. It's the ability to perceive feelings, pain, emotions in a subjective way. And those that are here, we know that animals are subjects of their own life just as much as we are subjects of our own life, right? We care as much about our bodies, and animals care as much about their bodies as we do. And they recognize that the human species, of course, is protected because we know firsthand what it is to feel pain, and rightly so. We should protect one another. They recognize that in all 50 states, animal cruelty is a felony if you are an animal protected under animal cruelty laws. But it turns out that if you're a farm animal, you're not protected under those animal cruelty laws. And that's when they recognize they didn't know that, first of all, right? We asked them if they knew that farm animals felt pain, and all of them agree that they feel pain, but they might not know that the pain they go through, and that's when the videos and information come in handy. These are some of the pictures that I wanted you to see of us in action. And the people that you'll see here come from different walks of life, in different states. These are kids, for example, pretending to be chickens, right? They're standing on a very painful surface, barefoot. They can't quit, they can't turn around. They recognize that they'll start fighting pretty soon if they're not let go, that they will pass on diseases. So it's pretty cool to make them experience that. These people come from, very poor neighborhoods or just middle class or upper class. Some of these are Christian schools. Some of these are public schools and private schools. But they are very open to the information. Even though it's very controversial for some, it's still an educational program because it allows them to make their own decisions. We present 2 huge school assemblies and auditoriums, as well as just individual classes. That lady there in red is one of our fantastic educators that is at our table out there, and she gives presentations here in this area, and she's fantastic. Some of other pictures that I wanted to show you. And I wanted to bring a few comments from just a couple from teachers and students so you realize what they think of us, and I'm going to read them aloud. This was a food and consumer science teacher. By the way, food and consumer science teachers are awesome at inviting us because our presentations really align with the standards. And that's what she said. Wow, I cannot thank you enough for coming and speaking to all of my classes over the 2-day span. After the kids digested, I think that's a cool word for this presentation, your information over the weekend, I've had multiple students come and tell me that they are now vegetarians because of you enlightening them on the treatment of animals and what meat really does to your body, just some of the reasons they mentioned. You spoke volumes to them and were engaging from start to finish. Remember, these teachers allow us to show a factory farming video, a slaughter video. But it's done in a way that is relatable, that is not confrontational. This other teacher said, thank you for taking the time to come to share with the students and staff. The presentation was informative, shocking, and interesting. Rarely do we gather such a large group of students for a presentation due to the students losing interest and becoming disruptive. However, you captivated the entire audience and kept their attention the whole time. Also, because of your presentation, some of the students and teachers have changed their eating habits, including myself. I no longer eat beef, pork, or drink cow's milk. That's after one presentation, right? These are some students. Oh, a third teacher. I really enjoyed the program. It was very informative. You made me want to look at my own life and change the way I eat. I feel as if I'm equipped to make informed decisions about where to get my food from. It is nice to know that people care so much about the world we live in. We can make an impact on nutritional wellness, one person at a time. This teacher actually ended up becoming vegan, and now she has a vegan blog on the internet. So it's so cool. This is one of the students that, they email us and write us on a regular basis. Thank you so much for coming to speak to our class. I wish more teachers invited speakers that can actually make a difference in the world like you. I have chosen to eat healthier and with compassion. My parents are supportive and are making changes. I no longer look at meat, eggs, and dairy as food. Again, this is huge. Amber said, I really enjoyed how motivated you were to get your point across. It really put me on the edge of my seat. I'm sure it was a video, but, to know more about these things. One of the videos was hard to watch, but I'm so thankful you showed it to us. I now understand why the standard American diet is so unhealthy and cheap. This is another student that just contacted us not too long ago, and she said, you were in my class last semester during my senior year in high school. Now I'm at Georgia Tech, and I'm the leader of the Veggie Jackets, a vegan club. And I said, well, that's fantastic, Kelsey. So were you thinking about food choices before our presentation? And she said, no, my favorite food was bacon. I had no idea about what's going on. And again, sometimes one presentation can make the whole difference. Even if they don't go vegetarian or vegan, they are thinking, and that's all we want, right? For them to start thinking and making connections. We have close to 50 educators now in the US and Canada and Australia. Our presentations are being brought into schools at dozens and dozens of schools and thousands and thousands of kids. In fact, between January and June, we presented to over 20,000 kids. And remember, once you have information, whether you like it or not, you become carrier of that information very naturally. You start talking to others about what you saw, what you learned. You might share a booklet. You might go online and start Googling about vegan diets or vegetarian or the treatment of animals or cowspiracy or whatever you've been presented with. And now we have, between January and June, we had about 25 to 30 educators, and now we have close to 50. So we project that we'll present to over 40,000 teens. Just last month in September, we reached about 10,000 teenagers with our presentations. So we think it's working, and we're very, we're thrilled that we can get the information in this age group that these are the power makers. I always call them the decision makers of the future, because teenagers in a few years are going to be the ones that choose what foods will become on demand or will be on demand. These are the kids that will, change life on this planet. And informing them, I think it's, attacking the problem at its roots. And I'm going to show you now just our promotional video. It's online, it's on our website, it's on YouTube. But if you want to share it or learn about our program, I think it gives you a little bit of an idea of what we do. I apologize in advance if the volume doesn't work very well, because we don't know if it's connected or not. So I'm going to hold the microphone to my computer and hope for the best. The Ethical Choices Program is a human education program that aims at reaching as many teenagers and college students as possible to inspire, inform, and empower them about issues that have to do with food choices in regards to the environment, health, and animals. It is probably the single most important issue that affects everything. It's almost like an octopus with a lot of tentacles, right? What we do is bring the information to kids in a way that is accessible, that is at their level, that is easy to understand, and that is practical. We bring awareness on some issues that are tremendously important and somewhat controversial, but we do it in a very factual way, humorous way, in a very sensitive way, because these issues sometimes feel so overwhelming. So they might think that they're such a small part, but with us, they feel empowered because we give them the choice of stepping up to something that is greater than themselves.
My name's Chloe and I'm 16 years old.
My name is Angelique and I am 18.
My name is Tyron and I'm 16.
Danoa, and I'm 16.
Our workshops are very interactive, so we have a lot of discussions with the kids, and we're open for dialogue, and the kids get to input a lot. So each day is a little bit different depending on what the kids bring to the table. I really liked it because I learned a lot today.
It was awesome.
I learned a lot of things that I didn't know before.
So we do that activity where we bring up two kids and have them take their shoes off, and they stand on top of milk crates, which are right beside each other, nice and close. We have them duck down a little bit because those cages are a little bit low.
They're in a really tight space. They don't have a lot of freedom.
My leg's still kind of shaking from it.
We think it's very important that the presentations are interactive because it engages the students. It makes them think. It encourages participation.
I feel like a lot of people need to know about what's going on to their food.
Everything that has life has feelings, whether we can see it or not.
Do you want to be like the past generation, or do you want to be a better one?
It's really interesting to see the kids putting themselves in shoes that they didn't normally put themselves in places where they don't normally think about it. It's awesome.
The presenters are all very well trained, committed human educators. Like I said, they go through rigorous training and continuous supervision. We have a very well-done curriculum. We have a nutritionist on board who answers questions from teachers and teens and their parents. So we know that there's a lot of back and forth going on. So we know that after the presentation, that doesn't stop there, that their minds are still thinking and questioning things. We encourage them to ask a lot of questions and most importantly, to discuss these issues. We're teaching them not to conform. We're teaching them to recognize that they have a lot of power.
We are the world, so if we change, then everything around us will change.
Animals have feelings too.
Eat healthier, make healthy choices.
Everything has a reason to live. Might as well give it a shot.
We have the privilege and the responsibility that when we know something, we become vehicles or carriers of that information. And this is a great way to just spread it in a very effective way as far as we can. Because people cannot be told what to do. And that's not sustainable. That will not last anyways. So what we want is to inform them of what's going on and to hopefully get them to see that there's a better way to eat and there's a better way to enjoy this beautiful planet.
We just have to be willing to try. That's the only way it's going to work. Then there's hope.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, thank you so much. So I'm gonna leave you with what we tell the students, that they shouldn't worry too much, that they have information and they have the power of choice. Thank you so much for your attention, and it's been a pleasure. Thank you. It's 4:50.
Yeah, it's perfect. Manik is going to lead us into a meditation for about 15 minutes before Dr. Lim comes on. Okay. Thank you, Lorena.